Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So I don't know if you remember, a few weeks ago, President Trump had to travel to Turkey for a NATO summit, and on his way back, he had to switch Air Force Ones because there was a threat from Iran. And the media, to include CNN, they completely lied about this situation to make it seem as if the new Air Force One couldn't protect President Trump. But now, ladies and gentlemen, the truth is finally coming out, and President Trump and the Secret Service, they did something remarkable where now the media, to include CNN, they've been completely humiliated. Watch this.
Newsroom, we begin with a remarkable new twist to a story already full of them. New reporting in the Washington Post about the president's return from the NATO summit in Turkey, which already included a change of planes, with the president, or so we thought, taking his old blue 747 for the first leg of the trip, instead of this new Qatari gift, red 747, which he boarded for the second leg from England back to the U.S. The switch was for security reasons, and now the Post is reporting that the threat was so severe there was a second switch onto a third plane. The president was not on this plane at all. Instead, according to the Post, even as members of the press were boarding from the rear door, the president, who we just showed you climbing the front steps, was leaving the plane, leaving on one of these. Quoting now from the Post, he was secretly shuttled minutes later to a smaller plane, an Air Force C-32A, via an airport catering truck typically used to load meals and other supplies pre-flight, according to U.S. official and corroborating material reviewed by the Post.
So just to explain exactly what happened here. So President Trump and the Secret Service, they literally outsmarted everyone, to include the media and Iran as well, because there was a threat on the president's life. So while the media, they were lying about the new Air Force One, because remember, President Trump had to switch from the new plane to the older Air Force One. But President Trump also made another switch without the media knowing about it. And this is important because this revelation literally dismantles the media narrative that the new Air Force One isn't properly equipped to protect the president, because the older Air Force One that they were arguing that was more equipped, the president also switched from that aircraft as well. And after being exposed, CNN, they're doubling down on this whole narrative that President Trump is at fault for this entire thing. And watch this exchange on CNN.
They're ignoring why the Secret Service had to make that change, why that he was put in that position, is because he did not take Air Force One, the original Air Force One that is completely...
That's not true. That is not true. But that's not true. That is factually inaccurate.
So we're saying...
The folks that we were talking about, just one point.
Okay.
The folks that we're talking about, the so-called decoys, were on the old Air Force One. Right. So yes, they were there. So despite the fact that has the top-of-the-line security...
Before all of that, no. It was before all of that, he flew to Turkey.
They didn't target that plane.
No, you didn't have that airplane, and he could not fly from back home from Turkey because that plane was not
that is not right. That is not accurate.
So I just showed you guys the situation surrounding the president's transportation and the security regarding that entire situation. And CNN, they're still doubling down on their old narrative that it's the president's fault because he took the new Air Force One. And to make matters worse, here we have this guy on CNN. I think his name is David Axelrod, and he's having a complete meltdown because President Trump left the reporters on the old Air Force One. Watch this.
It's stunning to think that all those on the plane were sort of a decoy there and were not told that the president wasn't on board, and that the deception was continued even after he was safely returned to Washington, and that's hard for me to understand. You know, the reason there's a press pool, you know the reason, and so does Scott. The reason there's a press pool is you always want eyes on the president. There could be a health incident, there could be an unannounced stop, and there need to be people there who can record that so the American people know. And so this habit of giving them the slip is concerning.
You're telling me that Iran is threatening the president, and this guy is worried about some pictures being taken by some reporters. And the best way to put the president's security at risk is by telling the reporters exactly what the president is doing or planning to do. But ladies and gentlemen, that's not the only thing that's causing CNN and the rest of the mainstream media to have a meltdown over President Trump, because President Trump took some questions in the Oval Office yesterday, and one of the issues that President spoke about was Abdul El-Sayed. He's running for the Senate up there in Michigan, and the media, they're having a complete meltdown over this. Watch this, and then we'll get into their reaction.
Well, the one thing is we have jihadists being elected all over the place. We have this, whether it's communism, jihadism. It's a friend of mine called up. He said, really, you should use the word jihadist because that's what's happening. And I'm not sure that anybody, if you take a look at what happens in other countries, I think that's not going to be necessarily the way we want to live. But when you look at the radicalism and the craziness of the candidates and the stupidity of what they're suggesting, let's get rid of the Supreme Court, let's get rid of the presidency, let's get rid of the Senate.
That was President Trump calling out Abdul El-Sayed. I think that is how you say his name. I'm sorry, guys. And the media, they're having a complete meltdown over this. Complete meltdown, because here we have a panelist over at CNN. Her name, I believe, is Tara Setmayer. I believe that's her name. And Jesse Arm completely took her on and completely dismantled her argument. Watch this.
Now, Donald Trump gets it right when he calls Abdul El-Sayed someone who is sympathetic to jihadists.
That was unconstitutional.
We are not talking about the Muslim ban. That was in 2017.
You got very animated. You're very upset about these things that were, these comments that were made. But you are not that upset when Donald Trump does it. I'm not understanding.
Well, you'll have to forgive me because Donald Trump didn't try to ram an explosive-laden truck into a synagogue with 140 preschoolers in it in my hometown. That was the guy who Abdul El-Sayed was accusing.
One at a time. But where is that smoke for Donald Trump?
I have it. I'll provide it. I'll give it to you.
You just did not. When he instituted a Muslim ban unconstitutionally.
That was in 2017. It's not the topic we're talking about.
It was one of the first things he did, but he still did it. Okay.
It wasn't a religious ban.
Yes,
it was. No, it wasn't.
Guys. The Muslim ban, the shithole countries, the attacks on Somalis and their religion, and all the Ilhan Omar. You can
when did Trump attack Somali's religion?
Go ahead, Tara, finish.
I mean, my God.
You're getting
you guys
things wrong,
don't want to
Tara.
listen because you're hypocrites.
No, you're just getting the facts wrong time and again.
Because you don't want to hear the truth about the fact that you are not willing to call
What did Donald Trump say about Somali's religion? What did Donald Trump say about Somali's religion?
10 seconds and we'll go around the table. Jesse, go ahead.
About him going after Somalis and Muslims, and
I yield my time back to...
That was a very painful thing to watch, but that is how you act when you have a severe Trump derangement syndrome, or TDS. And I think Tara, she was a Republican at one point, and then she switched parties after she got infected with TDS. But let us talk about Abdul El-Sayed, because CNN, they're having a meltdown over the word that President Trump used, and because conservatives, they're now pointing out the fact that Rabdul, or whatever his name is, Abdul El-Sayed, is a jihadist sympathizer. And one of the reasons that people are pointing to is this moment where once the Ayatollah in Iran, President Trump and Israel, they took him out. This guy's reaction is questionable.
20 weeks ago, when Iran's supreme leader was killed, you told your staff, according to audio obtained by the Washington Free Beacon, quote, "There are a lot of people in Dearborn who are sad today, so I just don't want to comment on Khamenei at all," unquote. I thought that quote was interesting because the Ayatollah has killed tens of thousands of innocent Iranians, not to mention the proxies that Iran has funded that have killed innocent civilians all over the Middle East. Why were you worried about offending people who support the Ayatollah?
Jake, on a day where we're mourning the loss of 2 more service members in a war we never should have fought, I think all of us ought to step back and ask whether or not everybody in Michigan, frankly, everybody in America, shouldn't be sad about the fact that this president, backed by the prime minister of a foreign government, took us to a war we had no business fighting in.
So he went on to not answer the question and try to point blame at President Trump and Israel for some oddly weird reason.
You do have people like Abdul El-Sayed, who, when he was asked about Islamist terror massacre that nearly unfolded in my hometown at a synagogue just down the street from where I grew up, his response was to tell his campaign that it was a risk for him to offer any condemnation whatsoever, and that it was really just the result of hurt people who hurt people.
So Jesse Arm brought up something important because after that attack in Michigan, this guy, Abdul El-Sayed, who's running for the Senate, actually said, hurt people, in an effort to justify the actions of those people who carried out that attack. Watch this.
I also think it's just critical for us to understand that hurt people do hurt people. And the circumstances happening 6,000 miles away can affect the lives that we live here.
And that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Please let me know what you're thinking in the comment section below. Also, please consider liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.